I am back with another sponsored video. This one is about Carol Burnett, and I included one of her quotes, comedy equals tragedy and time. So this video was sponsored by Jupiter Gone Wild. So thank you, Jupiter Gone Wild, for sponsoring this video. And I have to admit, when I got this request from you, I was like, Carol Burnett, I was like, "Ugh, she's boring." I was like, what is it about her life that's so interesting? Now, I know her claim to fame is the Carol Burnett show, but I never really watched it. I never really got into her as an actress or comedian. And the most I remember her from, or the movie I remember her from the most is Annie, where she played Miss Harrigan or Hannigan. Um, So yeah, but as I got into her biography, I started to really get intrigued, and I really enjoyed doing this video for you. So thank you once again, and I was proven wrong. Her life is rather interesting. So before I get into her chart, I'm going to read a little bit about her life. Now, Jupiter Gone Wild wants to know, what inspired Carol to become a singer and comedian? What kind of personality does Carol have behind closed doors? Why does Carol have slightly crooked teeth? What kind of relationship did Carol have with her co-stars? What kind of relationship did Carol have with her siblings and parents? Why is Carol so tall and skinny? Now, about this question, she's not really that tall. I mean, she's much taller than me. I'm 5'2", and she's 5'6". I would say that's medium height for a woman, because you have plenty of women that are above 5'6". So she's not really that tall, but she's always been on the thin side. What kind of relationship does Carol have with her husband? What led to Carol getting a divorce from her first husband, Don? What kind of relationship does Carol have with her children? And what led to Carol adopting her grandson? So all those questions you provided, that's your Gemini self node. And I will be answering these questions. Basically, the answers will be found throughout this reading that I'm about to get into. So first, let me talk about her life just real quick. Carol Crichton Burnett, born April 26, 1933, is an American actress, comedian, singer, and writer. Her groundbreaking comedy variety show, The Carol Burnett Show, which originally aired on CBS, was one of the first of its kind to be hosted by a woman. She has performed on stage, television, and film in varying genres, including dramatic and comedic roles. She has received numerous accolades, including 6 Primetime Emmy Awards, a Tony Award, a Grammy Award, and 7 Golden Globe Awards. Burnett was awarded Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2005, the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor in 2013, and the Screen Actors Guild Lifetime Achievement Award in 2015. So let's get into her early life. So she was the daughter of Ina Louise, a publicity writer for movie studios, and Joseph Thomas Burnett, a movie theater manager. Her maternal grandparents were William Henry Crichton and Mabel Eudora May Jones. Her parents divorced in the late 1930s. Subsequently, her parents moved to Hollywood, and Burnett moved with her grandmother to a one-room apartment near her mother. They lived in an impoverished area of Hollywood, California. Hollywood, California. Excuse me. It's early. In a boarding house with Burnett's younger half-sister, Chrissy. When Burnett was in the 2nd grade, she briefly invented an imaginary twin sister named Karen, with Shirley Temple-like dimples. She later recalled that, motivated to further the pretense, She fooled the other boarders in the rooming house where we lived by frantically switching clothes and dashing in and out of the house by the fire escape and the front door. Then I became exhausted and Karen mysteriously vanished. When Burnett was 9, she taught herself how to do the Tarzan yell, which she realized years later was a good vocal exercise for volume, and it became a fan favorite. Burnett's first experiences with singing were with her family. Her grandmother was a trained musician who could play the piano, although they did not have one at the time. And her mother played the ukulele, so they sometimes sang popular songs in harmony together around the kitchen table. Her grandmother frequently took Burnett and her sister to movies. They would take a few rolls of toilet paper home from the theater. The movies she saw in her youth influenced the sketch content in the Carol Burnett show. So let's get into her chart, and then I'll go back to parts of her bio. But I have parts of her bio interspersed throughout this reading. So here's her chart right here. Carol Burnett, she's a Pisces rising with Mercury and Uranus intercepted in Aries in that first house. She has a Taurus stellium in that second house, Gemini spanning the third, Gemini on the fourth house cusp, Pluto in Cancer in the fifth, Mars, South Node, Neptune, Jupiter in Virgo in the sixth, Libra intercepted in the seventh, Scorpio on the 8th, Sagittarius on the 9th, Sagittarius midheaven, Capricorn on the 11th, Saturn in Aquarius, North Node in Pisces, Sun conjunct Venus, very much an artist with that conjunction, Moon conjunct Chiron, pointing to her musical background, her mother playing the ukulele, which is very Moon conjunct Chiron because Chiron can deal with something that's unusual. And the ukulele is one of the more unusual instruments, being that little mini guitar. Not a lot of people know how to play the ukulele. Or not a lot of people play it, I'll say. So her numerology, birth number 26, single digit 8. So 26 is the number of partnership, especially in terms of karmic ties and karmic induced circumstances. It produces ambition because it's very much like Saturn and Capricorn. It can manifest as a successful career and public life. Also, 26 is very much about giving back. Once you have become successful, it's important that you give back, and that helps you to pay down some of your karmic debt that comes with that 26. Life path number 28, 10, and 1. Now, that 28 can cause a person to be too trusting. Also, 28 can produce come up, sudden gains through others, 28 and 10. Entertainment is a big theme that comes with that 1. Children is another major theme that comes with this life path number. Cycles of ups and downs, that's what this life path number produces as well. Also, cars and transportation, major theme of 28 and 10. So her ascendant, 23 degrees Pisces. So that 23rd degree results in being highly favored, especially by those in a position of power. So the 5 single digit, that represents the media, TV, writing. The 23rd degree of Pisces in particular. So this quote right here, she played the girlfriend of a ventriloquist dummy on the popular children's program. This role led to her starring role opposite Buddy Hackett in the short-lived sitcom Stanley from 1956 to 1957. She was 23 in 1956. So like I've said before, the degrees in the chart can deal with the age that certain life events have occurred. Pisces rules dummies and ventriloquists. So Pisces rising, that's her being on camera, wearing costumes. Also bound to have a direct contact with the spirit world. You'll see more about that in a minute. Sorrow and sacrifice are major themes. artistic, musical, imaginative, visionary. So, Pluto in Cancer, trine ascendant. Being a prominent and influential actress in Hollywood, name has power in Hollywood. After spending her first year in New York working as a hat check girl and failing to land acting jobs, Burnett, along with other girls living at the Rehearsal Club, a boarding house for women seriously pursuing acting careers, that's Pluto and Cancer in the fifth house, put on the Rehearsal Club Review on March 3rd, 1955. They mailed invitations to agents who showed up along with stars like Celeste Holm and Marlene Dietrich. Such attendance opened doors for several of the girls. She was cast in a minor role on the Paul Winchell and Jerry Mahoney show in 1955. Also, this trine produces strong psychic energy, especially with respect to her daughters, with Pluto being in the fifth house, and other loved ones. Close bond is maintained with deceased daughter. So I might as well get into this story now. Positive bond with children, very supportive children. So Jupiter going wild, let me tell you. So when I was researching Carol Burnett, I came across this story about one of her daughters. So she lost one of her daughters to cancer. And her daughter, I think, was only like 30, in her 30s at the time. And that really broke me down. I even shed a few tears because I was extra sensitive that night. And then I found this article where she's discussing her experiences shortly after her daughter had passed away. So this just really just warmed my heart. And it just oh, I love stories like this. So it really made my night reading this. So let me read this story now about her daughter. And you'll see that there's aspects in addition to that Pluto trine ascendant that deals with her encounters, her experiences. So let me just pull up this article. Carol Burnett speaks about the loss of her daughter to cancer and the mark it left on her. And seeing that cancer in the fifth house, you can take it literally because the doctor or scientist that came up with the term for the disease cancer, he likened it to a crab because a crab will hold on to something and it won't let go. And he was basically saying that's the nature of the cancer disease. So the fact that Carol Burnett had Pluto in Cancer in the fifth house is related to her daughter, one of her daughters dying of cancer. Carol Burnett is a name we all know and love. She is the woman who has been making us laugh through her many creative endeavors for years. But when it comes to Carol Burnett's personal life, the comedian has definitely had her fair share of grief. In case you didn't know, Burnett lost her daughter, Carrie Hamilton, to lung cancer in 2002. Before her death, Carol and Carrie wrote a play together. The piece, titled Hollywood Guns, was directed by Hal Prince and debuted in April 2022, just 3 months after Carrie's death. Now, that Pluto trine ascendant is also dealing with them working on the play together, creating the play together. The play premiered at Chicago's Goodman Theater before later making its way to Broadway. Carrie died, and I'm her mom, and I didn't want to get out of bed, Carol said of the time in her life while guesting on Dear Multi-Hyphenate podcast. And my husband went to the preview, said, Carol, you not only owe it to Carrie, you owe it to Hal to finish it. We're on a plane, my husband and I, to Chicago, and I said a little prayer to Carrie. Carol continues saying, I said, I'll do this, but I don't want to be alone. Be with me somehow, be with me. I need a sign that you will be with me, even if you are not physically present. After she and her husband landed in Chicago, and arrived at their hotel, Carol let go of her daughter, listened to her, and did exactly as she asked. As Carol told the podcast, upon arrival at the hotel, she was greeted with a huge bouquet of birds of paradise flowers by her manager. Carrie had a bird of paradise tattooed on her right shoulder. Shocked by the bouquet, she called Hal Prince. I called Hal and said, "How do you know? That was Carrie's favorite flower." And he said, "I didn't. I just called and said, send something exotic to Carol's room." That right there, I was like, yo. So I love stories like this, but this isn't it. But that wasn't the only sign Carrie sent to her mother. The next day, Burnett, Miller, and Prince went to dinner. The maitre d' brought in a bottle of champagne, compliments from management, and the label said Louise. That was Carrie's middle name and my mother's name. Then came the third and final sign, which took place on opening night. Carrie and I have always loved rain, and it rained on opening night. Well, I don't know, maybe a coincidence, but three things, and I felt them. And Carol admits she still feels her daughter every day, 23 years after her death, 23rd degree. Wow, doesn't anyone else have chills all over their bodies? I certainly got chills when I first read this. I was like, wow. So again, thank you, Jupiter Gone Wow, for sponsoring this video, because while in the beginning I was like kind of approaching it begrudgingly, I was like, once I got into her story, I was just like, oh, this is magnificent. So thank you so much. So again, that Pluto and Cancer trying to send in, that's basically Carol being able to still have that strong bond with her daughter, even though her daughter has passed on. That's her being able to communicate with her daughter, which is just so beautiful. So here's Pluto in the fifth, trine, ascendant. Moon and Chiron in Taurus sextile ascendant. Singing talent benefits her in Hollywood. All the awards she's won, because Chiron represents awards, among other things. So one of the positives of Chiron is awards that you could win. It could represent records that you have broken. Mother worked for movie studios. Also, this represents her exceptional vocalizations. So again, to reiterate, when Burnett was 9, she taught herself how to do the Tarzan yell. If you don't know what the Tarzan yell is, just go on YouTube and put in Tarzan yell, and then you'll see a clip of Tarzan, which was an old TV show about this man who grew up in the jungle and he was raised by apes and all this stuff. So which she realized years later was a good vocal exercise for volume, and it became a fan favorite. Ascendant square midheaven. Now, a lot of people have this square in their charts because that's just the nature of how the chart works often, with the ascendant square in the midheaven. Can produce conflicts with both parents, because while the ascendant is square in the midheaven, it's also square in the IC, aka fourth house cusp. Carol could have felt abandoned by both of them, could have viewed mother as overbearing and insensitive, challenges with freedom in terms of career, because that midheaven's in Sagittarius. Company is going in a different direction. Corporate politics could have limited her vision. Could have an inferiority complex that she had to overcome in order to put herself out there. But even, when you put yourself out there, that inferiority complex could still remain. And you just gotta, continue to persist despite it. So she has Sun conjunct Venus in her second house. Explains why she was drawn to singing and music, especially since this conjunction is in Taurus and in the second house, which reinforces the Taurus energy. Ability to make a lot of money in media TV with the sun at the fifth degree. Very relationship oriented, especially with Venus ruling the seventh house via intercepted Libra, and it pays off financially. Venus is at the sixth degree. At that sixth degree reinforces Venus energy as well as Taurus and Libra. Good relationship with her co-stars. She has a strong need to be married in order to feel secure, lucrative marriages and partnerships. Marrying a musician / drummer. She also married a producer. Close relationship with her daughters. Daughters follow in her footsteps in terms of being artists and singers. Sun and Venus trine Mars, South Node, Jupiter, and Neptune in Virgo. So these are some powerful, very beneficial trines that she has that's largely responsible for her success. So this quote is pertaining to these trines. After graduating from Hollywood High School in 1951, she received an anonymous envelope containing $50 for 1 year's tuition at UCLA, where she initially planned on studying journalism. Also, during her junior year at UCLA in 1954, a professor invited Burnett and some other students to perform at a party in place of their class final that had been canceled, which required a performance in front of an audience. Afterwards, a man and his wife approached her while Burnett was stuffing cookies in her purse to take home to her grandmother. Instead of reprimanding her, the man complimented her performance and asked about her future plans. When he learned that she wanted to travel to New York in order to try her luck in musical comedy, but could not afford the trip, he offered her and her boyfriend, Don Saroyan, each on the spot $1,000 interest-free loan. His conditions were simply that the loans were to be repaid within 5 years. His name was never to be revealed. And if she achieved success, she would help other aspiring talents to pursue their artistic dreams. Burnett took him up on his offer, and she and Saroyan left college and moved to New York to pursue acting careers. So these trines, amongst other benefits, are representative of her having these benefactors. Her getting the $50 for 1 year's tuition back in 1951. That was a steal back then. Wow. And then her getting the loan, the interest-free loan from this man. But it basically just helped her to be a perfectionist in terms of her art. And also just deals with all the accoutrements of her repertoire and all that. So she has Aries intercepted in the first house. So this points to her being a redhead. Also, it points to her being a pioneer. She's one of the first. So she's one of the first women to have a variety show. But this can also produce manic energy. So when you ask Jupiter, how is she behind closed doors, she might have a hard time turning it off. Very high strung, manic energy. Mercury and Aries in the first, ruling the third. So she has Gemini spanning that whole third house. And third house and Gemini deal with the media, TV shows, broadcasting. So this is representing the Carol Burnett show in particular, with Aries ruling names, first house is names, and then TV show, Carol Burnett show. Her animated facial expressions, and oftentimes she had that wild-eyed look, just like how you see here. That's that Mercury and Aries intercepting the first house, ruling the third, tugging her ear to communicate with grandmother during each broadcast. So close to the end of each broadcast, Carol Burnett would tug on her ear. And that was her way of signaling to her grandmother, that she was A-okay, like everything was all right. So I found that to be very interesting too. So that deals with that, especially with Mercury ruling the seventh. seventh house is dealing with the maternal grandmother. And her doing that became her signature move. So, signature move, very much Mercury in Aries. Developing new characters with Mercury ruling the third and the seventh. So, characterizations, that seventh house domain. So, the new characters comes in with Mercury in Aries, ruling that seventh house through intercepted Libra. Libra and the seventh house is dealing with characters or characterization. Also, impersonations, impressions, varying personas and identity. Mercury in Aries, quincunx Neptune in Virgo. So remember, I read about her creating this imaginary sister. So here it is. This quincunx right here is representative of that. So when Burnett was in the second grade, she briefly invented an imaginary twin sister named Karen with Shirley Temple-like dimples. She later recalled that, motivated to further the pretense, she fooled the other boarders in the rooming house where we lived by frantically switching clothes and dashing in and out of the house by the fire escape and the front door. She probably wasn't fooling nobody. She thought she was. Then I became exhausted and Karen mysteriously vanished. She killed her imaginary sister, basically. Mercury in Aries, quincunx Neptune in Virgo. So more about this quincunx, but more so dealing with, again, remember Jupiter going wild, you asked, how was she behind closed doors? How was she, how was the marriage and all that? With Mercury ruling her seventh house through Virgo, this is going to pertain to her marriages, relationships. So in terms of her marriage, this quincunx can cause her husband to accuse her of neglecting her wifely duties. Could have been issues with her unwillingness to submit to her husband. So I'm thinking that's what resulted in that first divorce. More than likely, it could have been an issue with him also feeling inferior to her, because with Mercury being in her first house, ruling her seventh, basically it's all about her, even when she's married. So she's in the driver's seat. So it's like her husband is along for the ride. And perhaps he had a huge problem with that. Even though he was pursuing an acting career, I never heard of this guy. We don't even know what happened to him, really. So obviously, Carol was exceeding him in terms of, her ability to get roles and her rise to success. And that could have been a big issue with him. Also can make her husband feel inferior or in slave or in her service, or basically he might feel like a slave to her, especially with Neptune being in that sixth house. And I see this quincunx as her just saying, oh, shut up and get on top of me. Like she don't even want to hear what he has to say if he has any gripes. And she's like, oh, just shut up and get on top of me. So with her Mercury being in Aries, she can be rather dominant and forceful in her speech. And, some men have a problem with women being rather dominant and taking the lead. Also, with this quincunx, a husband could have health problems due to drinking or drug use. And this is reflective of her father, who died of alcohol-related illnesses. So Mercury rules the fourth house and the seventh. Fourth house is the father, seventh house is the marriage partner. May require a sedative to get to sleep. So again, this quincunx can be indicative of how, she is behind closed doors. Again, like I said, more than likely, she was just a manic individual. You could see it when you watch the Carol Burnett show. She was just very, animated, very energetic. So I'm thinking with this quincunx, she probably needed a sedative to get to sleep. Maybe not all the time, but maybe sometime. Or maybe a nightcap, a drink, a stiff one. Working to the point of exhaustion. She did work an awful lot in the 50s, 60s, 70s. So here's her chart right here. So this is her current husband. So this is another aspect that's going to play out in her marriage. So Mercury and Aries semi-square Moon and Chiron. Now, this deals with also her mother's hurtful comment about her being a writer that stuck with her. So I'll read the quote in a minute. In terms of marriage, this semi-square can produce issues with Carol being the main breadwinner with at least one of her husbands. Could explain why she chose a man who was 23 years younger than her for her third husband. So again, this is her third and final husband, more than likely final husband. And her moon is at the 23rd degree of Taurus, ruling her fifth house. Fifth house is love and romance. Now, remember, she also has the 23rd degree rising, 23rd degree of Pisces. So that 23 is very dominant in her life, obviously. Now, on November 24th, 2001, Burnett married Brian Miller. Miller is the principal drummer for the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra and is 23 years her junior. Also, this semi-square points to her having to prove herself in a male-dominated field. So her North Node in Pisces opposing Mars, South Node, and Neptune in Virgo. It represents all the grooming, makeup, preparation, and routine she did for the camera. Also working behind the scenes. Perfectionist in terms of her artistry, but also becoming very familiar with sickness, hospitals, loss, and sorrow. Tapping into her vast imagination to aid her in her work. Being fully immersed in alternate reality. So this opposition enabled her to be like a great actress where she could really lose herself in those roles that she was playing, the different characters, all that good stuff, different identities, where she could actually like become someone else, which would basically produce that alternate reality. Also, this is her receiving help from the other side. So when you have a Pisces North Node, you're going to be forced to acknowledge that the spirit world is just as real as the material world. Being both on the receiving and giving end of charity. So remember, I talked about giving back with her birth number being a 26. These oppositions are basically showing where she is giving back. Remember, she received charity in the form of getting her tuition paid for 1 year of college. And she also got the interest-free loan from that one man. So yeah. And she's done a lot for charity, in particular colleges and universities. Mercury in Aries quincunx Neptune is South Node in Virgo. Mars in Virgo square Chiron in Taurus. So she worked as an usherette. These aspects deal with this story. She worked as an usherette at the Warner Brothers Theater, now the Hollywood Pacific Theater, when the cinema screened Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on the Train. Having already seen and enjoyed the film, she advised two patrons arriving during the last 5 minutes of a showing to wait until the beginning of the next showing to avoid spoiling the ending for them. But the couple insisted on being seated. The manager observed Burnett not letting the couple in and fired her, stripping the epaulets from her uniform on the spot. Years later in the 1970s, after achieving TV stardom, when the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce offered her a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, they asked her where she wanted it. She replied, right in front of where the old Warner Brothers Theater was, at Hollywood and Wilcox, which is where it was placed at 6439 Hollywood Boulevard. So this was her way of like thumbing her nose up and getting the last laugh, basically. And that's very Mercury and Aries type stuff. Sun and Venus in Taurus sextile Pisces North Node represents the money she has made through her work in Hollywood, also represents her singing ability. Also, her costume designer is represented by this aspect, the famous Bob Mackie. Bob Mackie has designed costumes and gowns for a number of artists, celebrities, He's also designed costumes for Diana Ross, Cher, Barbara Streisand, just to name a few. Being one of the movers and shakers in Hollywood, father was a manager of a movie theater. Could be representative of a spiritual advisor that she has. Moon in Taurus, sextile Pluto in Cancer. Having daughters who mirror her in terms of look as well as art, singers, actress, producer. So all three of her daughters have followed in her footsteps, have basically mirrored her. Not just like they all strongly favor her in terms of looks, but also their artistry, their careers, collaborating with and coaching other female actresses like Vicki Lawrence. Vicki Lawrence had a popular sitcom back in the 80s called Mama's Family. Also, this sextile represents the bird of paradise flowers and champagne she received after her daughter's death, which served as a sign that she was still with her. Represents the royalties she receives from the TV shows and other projects, making history as a woman. Nailing her role in Annie as Miss Hannigan. So that's Pluto in the fifth house is children. So this aspect shows that she's a natural in working with child actors. So yeah, if you want to just get an idea of Carol Burnett's talent and acting ability, just watch the movie Annie, because she really played that role to the hilt. Mars and Virgo trine midheaven. Basically, this is the sketch comedy aspect with the midheaven being in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius rules comedy. So the definition of sketch comedy: sketch comedians routinely differentiate their work from a skit, maintaining that a skit is a single dramatized joke or bit, while a sketch is a comedic exploration of a concept, character, or situation. That's the epitome of that Mars and Virgo. And then midheaven and Sagittarius, like I said, Sagittarius rules comedy. Mercury in Aries, the dispositor of Mars, is her skill for improv. So Mercury in Aries is very much about your ability for improvisation and improv comedy. That's basically what she was doing. Now, her work with two universities, UCLA and University of Hawaii in particular, the improvement of her jaw. So now we're going to get into her teeth, Jupiter going well. So the improvement of her jaw, smile, especially with Mars ruling the first through intercepted Aries. So when you have Aries intercepted in the first house, and especially if there's any planets in that interception, then there could be some issue that the person has with their face. Could be an injury, or it could be some type of deformity, or it just could be some aspect of their face that they don't like. So Mars in Virgo, of course, that can cause her to be insecure about something dealing with her face. It can cause her to be very critical of some aspect of her face. Now, Sagittarius, so that midheaven in Sagittarius, Sagittarius is improvement. And 10th house, midheaven, that's the teeth, the jaw. Can also be indicative of having a facelift, since Mars rules the 8th house. 8th house is surgery, and Sagittarius is the lift. So this image right here does really look like she's had some work done, like looks like a facelift, basically. Moon conjunct Chiron in 2nd house. Her mother disapproved of her acting ambitions. Now it says that she wanted me to be a writer. She said, "You can always write no matter what you look like." When I was growing up, she told me to be a little lady, and a couple of times I got a whack for crossing my eyes or making funny faces. Now, Moon in Taurus can produce a mom that's very much about appearances, very superficial, very much about certain standards. Of course, I never dreamed I would ever perform. The young Burnett, always insecure about her looks, responded many years later to her mother's advice of, you can always write, no matter what you look like, by noting, God, that hurt, in her memoir, One More Time. So her being hurt by her mother being so superficial, that's Moon conjunct Chiron and Taurus, and that second house exacerbates that. So Moon and Chiron and Taurus, quincunx, midheaven, and Sagittarius. This quote right here pertains to this quincunx. During her first performance, she got a sudden impulse to speak her lines in a new way. Don't ask me why, but when we were in front of the audience, I suddenly decided I was going to stretch out my words, and my first line came out, I'm back. The audience response moved her deeply. They laughed, and it felt great. All of a sudden, after so much coldness and emptiness in my life, I knew the sensation of all that warmth wrapping around me. I had always been a quiet, shy, and sort of girl, and then everything changed for me. You spend the rest of your life hoping you'll hear a laugh that great again. So that is dealing with her stretching out her voice. And Sagittarius deals with where you stretch things out, you elongate things. Taurus rules the voice. Also, this quincunx could mean that she was putting too much strain on her vocal cords at times. And it's one of the aspects that put her out of work for a while due to her neck injury. So she had to withdraw from a performance. I think it was a stage play because she injured her neck in a car accident. Living apart from her mother's blunt and insensitive ways inflicted wounds upon Carol's delicate self-esteem. Also, a child's safety and security brings repeated tests of faith with the moon rule in the fifth house. And that would be her daughter, Carrie. Because Carrie had a problem with drugs and alcohol. And then she also ended up having lung and brain cancer. So Carol Burnett went through it with one of her daughters, which makes a lot of sense with Pluto in the fifth house, especially with Uranus squaring Pluto. Jupiter in Virgo, quincunx, Saturn in Aquarius represents some of the challenges she encountered with CBS Network, with Saturn in Aquarius representing the network, making adjustments to her sketch comedy routines in order to appease network executives. Her overbite. So you talked about Jupiter going well, you asked about her crooked teeth, so this is more about this. So her overbite. So Carol Burnett said she had an overbite. Virgo can often produce an issue with the jaw, like being slack jawed, having crooked or overlapping teeth. Saturn in Aquarius can produce an abnormality of the teeth or a misalignment of the jaw. Jupiter rules the 10th house, teeth. Saturn rules the 11th, abnormalities. So this quincunx is pertaining to the issue with her teeth. The overbite in particular. Jupiter produces things that are overpronounced. So the overbite, things that are jutting out, things that are too big or Uranus in Aries square Pluto in Cancer. The network initially did not want her to do a variety show because it believed only men could be successful at variety. But her contract required that it give her one season of whatever kind of show she wanted to make. She chose to carry on the tradition of past variety show successes. So this square is pointing to her issues with trying to break into Hollywood through the variety show, but because she's a woman and she's going up against these men, the network, Uranus, male-dominated network, that's Uranus and Aries. Her daughter Carrie's medical condition, especially the brain cancer with Uranus and Aries, could have suffered from memory lapses with Pluto in Cancer. Being separated from her mother and being raised by her grandmother, her dear friend Lucille Ball, who passed away on her birthday. This story was very touching too. I was like, oh my God, like her life is so like spiritual. Her dear friend Lucille Ball, who passed away on her birthday, I'm sorry, I should have said must have been seriously unnerving when she received those flowers from her. So, real quick, Carol Burnett was good friends with Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball was her mentor, basically. And Lucille Ball would send Carol Burnett a bouquet of flowers every birthday. She never forgot a birthday. So Lucille Ball died on Carol Burnett's birthday. So Carol Burnett finds out that Lucille Ball dies, and then later on that day she receives a bouquet of flowers. Where's my phone? Because I'm gonna bring up the story real quick and read it because it's so touching. But that's very much Uranus square Pluto in Cancer. Just one second, let me find it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it quick enough to read the story. But let me just read the part about the overbite real quick because let me see. Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find it because it's a bunch of information here. Personal life, career. All right, but let me read the story about the overbite though. In a 2003 interview with Terry Gross on Fresh Air, Burnett said that both she and her daughter Jody had corrective dental surgery. Burnett had an overbite resulting in a weak chin. That Mars and Virgo can produce a weak chin. And her daughter had an underbite. After consulting the oral surgeon about Jody's bite, he said he could repair hers as well, giving her more of a chin. So both of them got operations. Prior to this, Burnett had worked on the 1982 film Annie and was called back to reshoot part of a scene after having recovered from the surgery. The scene involved her character entering and exiting a closet to retrieve a necklace. She told the director, John Huston, that she was concerned about her chin looking different from entering the closet to exiting it. And he simply told her to look determined. The scene is still in the film. But yeah, basically, I can't find the part about Lucille Ball, but you get the gist of it. Now, this square has forced Carol to acknowledge the fact that the spirit world is just as real as the material, with Uranus ruling the 12th house, such as there being no such things as coincidences. And again, this is helping her to evolve per the dictates of that Pisces North Node to acknowledge that the spirit world is just as real as the material world, maybe even more real. So here's her daughter, Carrie. So this is when I started to tear up. When I pulled up and put this picture right here, this is what got, no, it ain't that picture. It's this picture. When I saw that picture, I started to tear up. And then that's when I read the article about her daughter sending her signs. And I was just like, oh, Jupiter going wild. No, you didn't. I was like, you had me crying. But yeah, this was really enjoyable. So Jupiter conjunct Niobe in Virgo, the loss of a child due to illness, gaining guardianship of grandson. Now, Niobe deals with tragedy involving a child. It can often deal with the death of a child. Neptune opposition Orpheus. Contact with daughter on the other side before the play they wrote was debuted. So Orpheus deals with both plays and theaters, but it also deals with death and going to the other side. And Orpheus deals with music as well. Mercury conjunct Amor. This produces a love for writing, but it also pertains to her multiple marriages. So she was married 3 times, and with Mercury ruling the 7th, that reinforces that. Mercury deals with multiples, as well as if you have a mutable sign on the 7th house cusp, like Carol Burnett did, there's a chance that you could get married more than once. Mars and Virgo square Chiron and Taurus. So this is representing the weak chin. Virgo can produce diminutive features. It can produce keen features and diminutive features. And also the square is showing how it made her mouth look, with Taurus ruling the mouth. Mars rules first house through intercepted Aries. So again, the face being a major theme, especially in terms of issues with the face when Aries is intercepted in that first house. Insecurities are triggered through wounds to her self-esteem and focus on the superficial. Most likely suffers from dietary digestive issues with this square. Also, the injury to her neck impacted her ability to work. Chiron is conjoined to Phaethon. So it says here in 1964, Burnett starred in Broadway musical Fade Out, Fade In, but was forced to withdraw after sustaining a neck injury in a taxi accident. So Phaethon often pertains to car accidents, but it can pertain to plane accidents, just accidents that result in injury. And here's the bird of paradise flower that, again, the story of her receiving signs from her daughter that had passed away, and the bird of paradise flowers was one of the signs. And again, this story touched my heart so deeply. Mars conjunct Arabic part of death, coming face to face with death, especially through illness. North Node conjunct Arabic part of fortune, fulfilling her purpose through the arts, a career in Hollywood, enrichment through the arts. Mercury opposition part of sickness, becoming knowledgeable of sickness and disease through others. Saturn opposition Arabic part of understanding, gaining understanding of her daughter carries illness and addictions, with the Arabic part of understanding being at that 16th degree of Leo. 16th degree can pertain to illness and addictions. Uranus conjunct Arabic part of friends, trine Sagittarius midheaven. Around the same time, Burnett became good friends with Jim Nabors, who was enjoying great success with his series Gomer Pyle, USMC. I used to watch that show with my dad back in the day. As a result of their close friendship, she played a recurring role on Neighbor's show as a tough corporal and later as a gunnery sergeant. That's so Mercury and Aries. Gunnery. Even being a sergeant. Starting with the episode Corporal Carol. Later, Neighbors would be the first guest on her variety show each season, as she considered him to be her good luck charm. So she got both Mercury and Uranus and Aries in the first house. The Uranus and Aries, but also the Mercury and Aries, the gun theme with the Aries. But yeah, and how she put her friend out in front. He was the first guest on each season. That's very Uranus and Aries in the first house. Her looking out for her friends. And this quote right here pertains to this as well. In 1959, Lucille Ball became a friend and mentor to Burnett after having guested on Burnett's highly successful CBS TV special, Carol Plus Two, and having the younger performer reciprocate by appearing on The Lucy Show. It was rumored that Ball offered Burnett a chance to star on her own sitcom. In truth, Burnett was offered but declined. Here's Agnes by CBS executives. The two women remained close friends until Ball's death in 1989. Oh, here's the story right here. I forgot I had copied and pasted it here. So here's the story about Lucille Ball and the death. So Ball sent flowers every year on Burnett's birthday. When Burnett awoke on the day of her 56th birthday in 1989, she discovered via the morning news that Ball had died. Later that afternoon, flowers arrived at Burnett's house with a note reading, "Happy birthday, kid. Love, Lucy." So again, her being forced to acknowledge that nothing is a coincidence and that the spirit world is just as real as the material. So that concludes my reading on Carol Burnett. Again, thank you, Jupiter Going Wild, for sponsoring it. if you would like to sponsor a video, a case study, one of my episodes of the demonic and the prey, what have you, you can send me an email and just put sponsorship in the subject line, and then tell me what person you would like me to do a reading on, and then I'll tell you how much the sponsorship would be and all that good stuff. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will be back with some more videos. Peace.